Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. My own journey spiritually started off in that very way, understanding, misunderstanding. For the longest time, I only saw Christianity, because that's what I was raised in, from the fundamentalist standpoint of this, linear timeline and how things were set up. And as a logical thinking kid, as a computer geek, somebody, it has to, code, it has to make sense.
Yeah, right.
As I look at history, what people begin to read, then I find these discrepancies. And so I had always, actually in the beginning, I just threw away everything. I just completely got rid of all religions. Like, they don't know what they're talking about, because most people, again, the adults around, couldn't explain the discrepancies because they had no real knowledge of them.
Sure.
And so I just threw it away as twaddle till I got into my 30s, and I saw some things within my own life that had occurred, and they seemed not to be just from this material understanding, from just life occurrence. This couldn't just simply be coincidence. I was getting everything I wanted in my life, good and bad. Is my realization, and so that was whoa. That made me now have to search out understanding, to throw away my misunderstanding, to look at the Bible to see what good lied in it, as opposed to just seeing the bad. Right. And so it took me on this serious journey that is what really had me start digging into history, from Iraq or Babylon to Egypt to whatever. As I started looking at history, it's all pretty well laid out as far as what they've been able to dig up, what they've been able to find. And so then I had to ask myself, well, if this has this truth in it, if this has this spiritual core, this truth in it, then I should be able to find the same understanding in the hearts of other cultures. And so I, in a sense, set out to now see, okay, well, wait a minute, what are other cultures saying? Are they? And so as I look at other cultures, here again expressed within their history or expressed within their spiritual texts, are the same understanding of love, of acceptance of one another, of doing right by one another, and the benefits of what you get from choosing love, and the benefits in the sense of what you get from choosing lack of love. And it's simply, for me, again, this love is understanding and not understanding. I found that spiritual core throughout all these different cultures. Not necessarily, again, to say what is history, but what is the struggle within us all. And that spiritual teaching that each culture has to lay down to help their young, to help their next generation, so on, from what they learn is, how can I help them with the struggle that they're all going to have to go through? And that struggle, again, is seeking understanding or just accepting not understanding. Right? Because if we turn off all lights in here and it goes dark, we get a little weirded out. It's the light that makes us have a better understanding of more settledness about just being present. And I think it's that light that a lot of people lose. And I think it's that unfair judgment that because people may not have that same historical timeline, that they might not have that same spiritual core. And it's that piece of it, I think, that people get lost in their ego of it. What is of God, again, is spiritual. What we see within all the animals on the earth, we even see within ants, is that they have a civil society. Nobody sits down and say, be nice to them or whatever. If there's a bunch of gazelles running around, the lion is just going to eat one of them. They're not going to just sit up there, just killing gazelles for the hell of it, like we do, thinking we got dominion. Lions are just going to eat what they need to eat because they understand it's all connected. Right. But again, that comes inside of them. It's not something that comes outside of them.
Sure. Spiritual core. I think it goes right back to what I was talking about. We're a part of the same human race. We all have that core, that spiritual DNA that defines us as God's people. That spiritual DNA that is part of how we're made. And as you talked about, over time, we begin to introduce our ego. We introduce our ego, and in introducing our ego, we begin to, I'm going to use the term redefine. I know you challenge that sometimes, but no, it's back to, what I mean by that is over time, we begin to readjust, or as redefine God's principles to fit our need. And as we do that, and that occurs through cultures, that occurs through not individuals, but again, collectively, cultures have the ability and has historically redefined or defines people's ego. For all of us, it's important that we as individuals, and then as individuals can influence the culture, or from a culture, as you said, go back to gain that understanding of that spiritual DNA, that love. There's two components, as we talked about. For me, one of love and one is selfishness. To me, those are the opposing forces. Those are the opposing attitudes. Because love, for me, becomes an unselfish behavior. And generally, the opposite of love, or the thing that drives us away from love, is selfishness. And the minute we can learn to put away selfishness, as you mentioned, the lion is going to go out there and he's going to kill one gazelle for survival, for his sustenance. He's not going to kill all of them and freeze them, or whatever the case may be. He's not going to destroy all of them, because he recognizes if he destroys all of them, he will in effect destroy himself, because his food chain will be in effect destroyed. So I think as humans, is we can learn the fact that we whatever we need to do it for survival, for sustenance, not destroy other people, because in effect, by destroying other people, we will effect, at the end of the day, destroy ourselves. So truly, that attitude, that spiritual DNA of love that is embedded in us from birth, is part of how young kids, and we have a kid in our congregation, when he comes into the hall, he just looks around and opens up his arm, and he's just looking for somebody to love and to love him. It would be great if all of us as adults would do the same thing as we walk into the hall. Personally, when I'm there, I stand around, I walk around, I say hello to people, I share my excitement to see them, I share my love with them. And it's a wonderful feeling. It gives me a wonderful feeling, because I'm sharing. And I know, based on the reaction, I see people appreciate it. So I see the power of genuine love. I see the power of love breaking down barriers. The friend I was telling you about that got himself in trouble, and I was telling him, and I said, I think this is the way you should handle it. And he disagreed with me, and basically said to me, why don't you just stay out of my business? and again, understanding, misunderstanding. I was approaching him in love. I was approaching him to help him to see how, in looking at it differently, in changing the way he's thinking from selfishness to love, he'll get a different result. But what he's told me is, no, I like the direction I'm going. I like the decision I make. I am making it in love also, but love for me. And as long as I continue to use my definition of love, I am happy with the results I get. And that's where I think sometimes it's hard for me to get it. It's hard for me to understand how someone can, in effect, be happy in their misunderstanding. But then I have to realize, no, it's my misunderstanding. That's their understanding. That's their truth. That's their reality. It may not be mine. I may not see it the way they do, but that's what they're locked into. And unless I can get them to step back from it and look at it differently, nothing will change.
I'm gonna take this opportunity to delve into the story that you told about your friend. Really what I want to talk about is his reaction to you, and basically talk about us redefining love, and even in a sense touch on a mutual friend of ours. I don't necessarily know if I want to use his name, but a mutual friend of ours that used to come and sit down and talk to us, and him seeing it from the same perspective, in the sense that you saw speaking with your friend. And so we'll just say A.
Okay.
A is sitting there out of love, trying to get me to accept his perspective. Right? And my response
out of love.
Was one, not necessarily out of love, it was more out of ego, out of selfishness. And because what he was actually displaying was his own selfishness of what he had interpreted as love. And so as I had to sit back and combat my own ego, my own misunderstanding of what it was he was trying to do, which was challenging, for me, he's challenging my Afrocentricness, my historical timeline and blah, 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 because he's got it in all these Bibles and books. And so, my ego is reared up, and he's, again, feeling the same way. And so, again, my great lesson from A was, once I pulled out my ego and began to just understand, actually love him for what it was that he was trying to do, then his own ego collapsed in on itself. He can now, damn, that's what I'm doing. And so I take that around to your friend, because one thing I do is I coach people, and then because I've coached some people, then they want to coach other people. And the one thing that they always do, and I'm not saying that you were doing this or this.
I was,
but
you can say that.
One of the things that they do in wanting to help someone is tell them what to do. And something, me and my own ego, and who I've always, you can't tell me nothing. I've always been like, you can't tell. And I've gotten that about people. And truly loving them, I get, okay, they're in their own story. And so what I always do is share my own story, share why it didn't work for me, what I've learned from my own way to, again, drop my ego, share a spiritual truth, which is just my own story about myself, and let that be. That's a much a more effective way of getting across to people and truly being able to find where we are actually displaying love. It's something that I call the mirror, that each person is a reflection of us. And so if I sit here as an a-hole and I'm like, oh, you'd be sitting here offended, like, and you'd have two choices. You could address me back in that way, or you could bounce because the energy don't match. Right? And so that's me beginning to find out, well, then, am I really showing love? If I'm really showing love, as Christ demonstrated, that then my actions will change the hearts of the people in front of me, or change them being in front of me.
You're right. Because Jesus showed love, and it changed people from being in front of him. It didn't necessarily change them. So yeah, I agree with you.
And so again, as something I didn't write down, but this mirror concept of mine is that, again, if the person's response to me is one of misunderstanding, then that's what I'm displaying. It's a way that I check in with my own sense of things.
I'm trying to process what you just said, because I think you're right. A lot of sometimes, I'm gonna say a lot, but to your point, people's reaction sometimes is in direct result of our action. So in effect, the attitude that we are projecting a lot of time is projected back at us. And I use the example of having a discussion with somebody and they get heated. You just feel like you got to get heated up. You got to match them. So that's how a lot of times as humans we react and interact. Again, in the example I was giving you, there were potentially there's potential that I could have presented it better. But I think in one of the things, and I don't think I did bad, and I said that no, not at all, no, not at all. But it's the reason I say that is in response to a number of things you've taught me. But one of the things that again you in our interactions that you've shown me that, as you just pointed out, don't tell them what they're doing wrong. Just try to have them understand based on a story if you have a comparable story. But if you don't have a comparable story, by telling a story. Okay? By building an example outside of theirs. Okay? And that's what I tried to do. I didn't try to attack the choice he made, but try to present the choice he made as a story outside of his own. But here's where I challenge that concept. Sometimes people have to understand the story you're telling them is their story. Because as in this case, sometimes people are so locked in their reality. And I'll use the Bible example of Paul. He was so locked in his reality that Jesus had to slap him upside his head to let him know, this is your story. And sometimes with people, we have to slap them upside their head. So I agree with you in that sometimes we can see their misunderstanding from our misunderstanding, but sometimes it's not our misunderstanding that's the problem. It's their conviction. It's their misunderstanding. That's the problem. Not the way we conveyed it to them. So that's where I would disagree with you a bit. Not that we, sometimes people react to the way we present things. That's clear. And that's, you can see that just through life. But that sometimes, no matter how we present something to someone, because of their natural behavior, they're going to react the same way. My daughter's like that. And I'm working with her. But she's like that. When you have a dialogue with her and she's starting to recognize she's wrong, she escalates. Mm-hmm. She takes up the tone and volume. Mm-hmm. And what the reason she's doing that, for me, the way I think, is to stop the conversation. See, that's to stop the conversation. And when I see that, I stop the conversation. Because I recognize then the dialogue is ended. And that's in our interaction with people, we have to learn those things. And just like in the example I give you, I noticed the reaction, so I knew the dialogue had ended. I knew that me trying to have a dialogue of reason was not going to happen. So I didn't feel it was in my misunderstanding, but in the fact that their commitment to the results they want is what is gonna is the only outcome that's acceptable to them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's disappointing to us. Sometimes it's heartbreaking. Sometimes it's discouraging. But again, something you've taught me. It's their truth. It's their reality. And we have to then make a decision whether we want to participate in their reality or not. Even if they choose not to get out of our lives, we have to choose how we want to deal with it.
There's the other side of the conversation of what something that you taught me in the sense of testimony, of testifying to what you believe within where you've been, where your love of Jehovah is. That testimony, that is what I believe that we are supposed to share with folks. Not again instruction to tell them what to do, but just testify to your own life.
Right.
The other piece of it, of when someone still may not hear, they still may be lost. As you say, now it is for us to decide what we're going to do with it. And for me, it's always to take my lesson, to get my lesson from it, to say, get lost. I'm like, what's the lesson in that for me?
Right.
Where does that take me with my own? Because again, within that conversation with I'm ready, to get my own books.
I remember you getting those. Actually, I do remember those.
And so I had to say again, he ain't gonna hear me, and go back and forth from do we even have this conversation? And now I say, what is the lesson that God, the universe, has in this for me? Because I don't believe in coincidences. Mm-hmm. And so in a sense, to detach from whatever it is he's taken away from it, and again take my blessings from the fact that he's here. That's the true love of someone, is to see, well, what is it that this interaction with that person is going to do for me positively? What can I take away from it? I think that there is the piece of where, again, people may get lost, like the same way I get lost in the sense of like, this mug, this no good guy, he's not listening to me. But to step away from my own ego, my own selfishness of trying to get this guy in line with my thinking, and try and get in line with what is it that the universe, God, Allah, he, her, however you want to address, is putting out there for me. I believe in the immensity of God in such a way that it's nothing that I could fathom, nothing that I could quantify within even what, the Hebrews were attempting was to say God without having a word for God, because it's just so awesome, so big that there was no way to quantify something so immense. And this is something you see displayed within Islam, of where they try and have no images and so on and so forth. Even Christ said, don't make it about me. Don't make it about me. Make it about my Father. Make it about, don't sit up and try and worship me. Make it about my Father. And so it is always supposed to be something that's much, 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 much bigger than you could even imagine. And so trying to quantify it, to say, I know his story or his mind. For me, again, it's just, have you taken a look at the universe? Have you seen how big and complex it is? How incredibly precise and perfect it is? To quantify it is like unfathomable to me.
Quantify. Identify. See, that's where I see the difference. I don't believe we need to quantify God, because, you're right. We look at the universe. We look at the vastness of his power. Like you say, within our understanding, it extends beyond that. As we see over time, the more and more we're discovering. Matter of fact, I heard a guy the other day talking about how big the universe is and throwing out trillions and quadrillions and all kinds of numbers. And I said, he's probably wrong. Because all the numbers he's throwing out is based on guesses. It's not based on anything quantifiable that he's gone out there and counted. You don't are you going to tell me someone counted all of the universes that are out there? Well, no, they can't see them.
Well,
they can't see them.
Well, first you're speaking of as we come through time, when some people say universe and whatnot, they were just talking about what they can see around the Earth. And then as they've grown, and they were talking about the solar system, and now it's grown to be, and now it's actually gotten into be where they're talking multiverse.
Absolutely.
As they get bigger and bigger. And so you really have to be asking, well, what is it that this guy's perspective is actually pointing at? And so if he's pointing at the 14.8 billion years of existence of the universe, what they're really talking about is the light that we can see. And that is what they're quantifying and counting as far as saying what time is. Based on what we can see. Not to say,
But that's the point I'm making. That's the exact point I'm making. But when we hear the speak, as if it's... Okay, right. So that's what I'm talking about. But more important, what's important to me is our ability to identify God. Identify, as you said, his existence. Identify his characteristics. Identify his principles. Identify him. The scriptures, as I read and understood it, brings out the point that God wants us to come to an accurate knowledge of his identity, of his existence, of his principles, of his essence. And I think if that's his goal and his objective, then he has to have provided us the ability to acquire that. And I feel very strongly that that does exist. So as you mentioned, our ability to identify the true God and identify that spiritual essence that defines him and that can also or should also define us. I believe that's that goal, that's objective that he's put in front of all of us. And that's why I believe that commonality that exists among scriptural documents, among different religious gospels or books, you see that true harmony as to that essence of God. Part of the unfortunate of that whole concept is not so much in the correctness or the incorrectness of the scriptures that people use, but in the personal application of those scriptures. And I remember one of the individuals I used to have a discussion with was a Muslim, and a very, very knowledgeable Muslim man. Quran, he read the Bible. We had great discussions, and we talk about a lot of different things. But we talked about the similarity of Islam and Christianity, and both driving to the concept of living a life that honors God. Mm-hmm. And when you look at both of them as behaviors or teaching that can help us live a good life, absolutely, truly applied, beautiful. In a lot of ways, I said this to him. I said, as he told me, he says, Islam came about as in principle, a adjustment to the distortion created by Christianity. And I agree with him, because you look at the historical teaching, you look at the what has happened. Folks made a mess of Christianity. But you know what's interesting? They're also making a mess of Islam. Exactly in harmony with the way they made a mess out of Christianity. And I jokingly said to him at one time, you see...
And exactly as they made a mess out of Judaism.
Absolutely. And then it goes back to...
It's like historically messy.
But it's God's truth messy. You see, and that's the key. Correct.
It's perfect.
And that's where I go back to say, all of us, regardless of religion, all of us, and that's why I embrace Jehovah's Witnesses, and because I believe they did what God wanted them to do. That is, go back to the truth. Not as we locked ourselves into Christianity as taught by Christ, because as you and I talked about, Christian teachings preceded Christian demand. Christian teaching,
Jesus
the truth. Jesus the man, I'm sorry. Jesus the man. See, when Jesus came, the religious title that was given to what he was teaching was called the way. It wasn't called Christianity. It was called the way. And the way was also in the Old Testament or Hebrew scriptures. The way was the way the Jews were supposed to walk. The way was the way the Egyptians were supposed to walk. The way was the way all mankind is supposed to walk. Okay? That is the way. That is the truth. That is the life that Jesus represented in his earthly existence. He materialized as a man here on earth, and indeed Jehovah, through the witnesses, resurfaced this truth, resurfaced this way, resurfaced this life that is in accordance with what he originally purposed. So for me, my goal is to identify God and his truth, not necessarily quantify it. Because as you're saying, even God said, my ways are way above your ways. Don't try to quantify my ways. Try to understand it, identify it, and apply it. And that's been, for me, my journey. My journey has always been, God said he wants me to know the truth. So my job is to go find the truth. And the truth has to exist, because if the truth don't exist, God is a liar. And that's not possible. Because he says he wants me to know the truth. So if he wants me to know the truth, the vehicle to the truth, the identity of the truth, the evidence of the truth has to exist. I truly believe that. And that's my continuing journey. That's my continuing journey. I sit here today as a witness telling you I believe this is the truth. But in all our discussions, God speaks to us. He works through us. He journeys through us. The word of God is alive in us. The light keeps getting brighter. So if the light starts shining somewhere else, that's where I'm going to go. But right now, that light, the truth, is shining where I think I am. And that's the reason for what I believe. That's the reason why I'm comfortable and happy to talk with you, to talk with anybody. Not in fact trying to convince you or trying to argue or fight with you. No, because I love and I believe what I believe in. And with that in mind, I'm following God's guidance. It says, be willing to tell people, be willing to share, be willing to defend what you believe in. That's what I'm all about.
You know that is exactly what I love about you. Even as we started talking years ago, I'd always said that I wanted to be able to sit down and be able to speak to a Jehovah's Witness, and it is two reasons behind that. But one selfish, one. For the selfish reason of wanting to prove the fundamentalism wrong and prove myself right, and from the spiritual perspective, wanting to actually prove that there is a truth, to actually prove that there is a way. And as Jehovah's Witnesses were the hardest to reach and talk to, because you know they like, here, take this. I'm out, you know. And it didn't hold out to be true, because I had a lovely couple before you that used to just sit down and talk to me, and having discussions with people opened me up even further, right? People who I felt would push me farther away opened me up even further to the truth. I don't say that there is not a truth. I just say that the truth is always right now. And so if we ever want to find the truth, there's no going back to it. There's no going forward to it. There's only an accepting it right now. And in accepting the truth, in accepting the way, that's the simplicity of it. I agree. And what anyone is trying to do in a complicated sense of things, in a pantheon of gods and explanations or whatever, is trying to get people to just kind of like go this way. Like it seems simple, but in the complexity of the mind, it's a very hard thing to achieve, because you feel you're right on so many different levels. And so I don't disagree, which is something that like struck me so crazy, that you know that I don't disagree that there is a way, that I don't disagree that there is a God, that there is something that you can identify as just simply higher than yourselves, something that's beyond anything that man could create. Again, we can look up and out and into this universe and see, you know, that there is something above me. And so for me, there's just never been denying a God. It's just, again, in that fundamentalist way. And so as what always brings me back to saying, okay, well, I want to know the truth. I want to know God's truth. And you say, you know, if there is no truth, then what is this all about for me? What is this all about if there is no truth? There's no way for me to, I won't necessarily say control my life, but have a say in my life, to actually, you know, have a direction in my life. And that can only be assessed from within my own spirit. No other spirit can come and tell my ego through to my spirit who I am, what I should be doing, and so on and so forth. And so that there is that simple, I'll say, shift in perspective, not necessarily disagreement of where when you're saying truth, you're saying within the Holy Bible, and you can go back to it. And when I'm saying truth, it's something within us that we can now go out and tease out of us by looking at holy scriptures of other people to see, and now actually sit and apply it. Again, these discussions going back 10 years now, which is, you know, like, wow, have always been for me to learn, for me to deepen it for myself, for me to actually test the truth, which, you know, I always have to refer to and say that at one time I was an atheist, and so they come out and say, you know what, I've been testing and showing, and that moment with A on my couch, of him dropping that facade and being my brother, being me, proved that to me again that there is a way. A way. Not that I know it at all moments. Not that, you know, from, you know, tomorrow I'm gonna be on that way. But there's that struggle of trying to find that balance, trying to find that way, trying to test within myself. Is this the truth? Is this the truth? And that's moment to moment to moment to moment. That's how I look at time. Not past, not future, but right now.
You know what's no. You know what's fascinating? What you just said. As you make statements and comments like you just said about testing, that is a fundamental teaching of God. He tells us that. He says, keep testing that you're in the truth. Keep searching for that. Don't sit there as people do. I learned this today. I'm good. I don't need nothing else. No. He tells us it's a daily event. Read the Bible. Even if something you read today, you understand it this way today because of your level of maturity. Read it a year from now. You're gonna get a different perspective because now your I'm gonna call your lenses that you're looking through are different. They're better. They're more. They're clearer. They're sharper. They're more focused. Now God can reveal a little more to you because now He understands that you have the foundation, you have the background, you have the capacity to understand what you're saying. So as you just described, both of us are having that journey. Mm-hmm. All of us should have that journey on a daily basis. None of us should ever believe that we are so Christ-like that we don't have to continue testing whether we're in the truth. Keep reading God's work and making adjustments in our lives.
Well, applying.
Jay, you know, the beautiful thing about the scriptures and that I learn is the scriptures as of no value unless you apply them. Mm-hmm. They're of absolutely no value. And you see so many people that's manifested that truth. That the scripture has no value. It has not exerted any power in their lives because they fail to apply it.
Well, you know, there is that me not wanting to knock the Bible out of people's hands or whatever, but have them not be so lost in ritual. Right. Not so lost in because they went to church, right, or because simply that they prayed last night, right, that now they don't have to go out and test each relationship, each encounter with themselves as the person in front of them, right? That each person deserves love or understanding, right, even if they're lost, right, unconscious, angry. They probably having a hard day. Right. People deserve to have a hard day. It ain't my business to get into their hard day and make mine hard.
Right. There you go. And that's the beauty and that's the power. That, you know, the beauty of what you just said is that each one of us have a power. And that power that we have is in effect how we are going to reflect the world in our day. Okay? So we can choose to reflect that love, that word through love. Matter of fact, Friday when I was driving home, I was listening to a song by Lou Rawls. And it was, you got one life to live. But there's a part of the song that says, live it in truth, live it in love. That took on a whole different meaning for me. But it's a powerful thing. Mm. Live your life in truth. Live your life in love. That's the power we have. Mm-hmm. So.
As always, it's that great discussion talking about just life, something what I want, not just in the sense for us to continuously always learn, but also to give other people an opportunity to just hear two African American men discussing spirituality and religion and their own struggles with life, religion, spirituality, ego, selfishness, so on and so forth. I think we all are having the same human experience, and just hearing other people talk about it helps people. That truly reaches them, whether they want it to or not. They're like, oh, dang, that kind of sounds like my life. And it hits them, right? You try and tell them, you reach it out for them, they're getting pushed away. Yeah. And so us just being open men, sharing, I think that's a beautiful thing, beautiful help that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to see. People with different perspectives having a civil conversation about the different perspectives.
Right. Right. You know, as you mentioned, Jay, I want to encourage people to have the conversation for one simple reason, and you just mentioned it earlier. We're both learning. And by each one of us having conversations, we can all learn. And in that learning is where our growth comes. In that learning is where our opportunity for understanding, an opportunity for, again, experiencing love. Yeah, as I was saying, having the conversation, it provides a beautiful opportunity for us to break down the barriers and have the opportunity to experience life from each other's perspective. And as you said, we're all going through the same struggle. The storylines may be a little different, but it's the same struggle. And again, it's always a pleasure. I look forward to a conversation next week, all right?
Always.
All right, my brother. Awesome.